We're back. It's just you and I today.
Yeah,
I
we
don't
were going
think.
to have Suzanne, but
Yeah,
she got sick, so it's all
yeah,
right.
she couldn't make it. So shout out to Suzanne. We want her to get better as soon as possible. And welcome back. This is pretty cool. My right-hand rock star Suzanne is joining me today. We're going to show you
You
what
mean
I
Catherine?
personally
I mean, I
did. I
wish
say
it was Suzanne, but
I
it's
wrote
all right.
this. Catherine.
It's
Apologize.
okay.
My right-hand rock star Catherine is with me today. I am really excited to do this particular demo on the composer side because I have a long history of building graphics going back many, many years. And I can tell you that this particular feature is powerful, really, really powerful, very easy to, after a few repetitions of seeing it, it's pretty easy to wrap your head around what we're doing here. But, and it really shows off the nature of the platform being pure web, everything from, as you know, from the dashboard into Composer, you are always in the web, getting multiple outputs out of browsers, web browsers. So we're flexing our muscles a little bit here, would you say? Just a little.
Yeah, I would. I mean, I think a good
so.
comparison for this too, for you guys to think about, is if you've built your own websites in a web builder, for example. We like to use Webflow a lot.
Yeah.
You have your snap points on your website where you can preview what your website's going to look like in all these different aspect ratios. And so that's kind of the approach that is used here in Singular. So it's pretty intuitive. It's based off of the work that web builders have done and so forth. So we're excited to share it with you.
Let me go ahead and share my screen. Let's dive right in. So I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to share screen 2. I'm going to dual monitor today, and we are looking at the Singular dashboard. And step 1 is we're going to go directly. Well, we already have a little folder set up here called adaptive. So this morning when Catherine and I were on, new folder, adaptive, basic stuff, templates. And I did a simple search for adaptive, and you guys can all download this from the template library. And the one we're going to use today is adaptive overlays for screen sizes. And we're going to click this one. We're going to say, use this template. It's going to bring it down.
Real quick, yeah. Stephen, before you X out, in here, you can see that there is a hyperlink. It says, click here for the required supplemental tutorial. So this is something that you'll need to follow along as you do this on your own. But we don't need to go through it now because we're just going to talk through it.
Yep. Actually, thank you for doing that, because I'm going to put this on my second monitor to sort of keep me honest, which is Catherine's absolutely right. That's a really nice way to go back and maybe peruse through this video. And you can bring up that link in the template library right here when you download the template, and you get a very nice description of what we've done here in the webinar. So I'm going to go ahead and X out of this, and now we've got a composition. I'm going to go ahead and open it. And what we've done here, what Catherine's prepared, is a very nice composition where we ask you to do a few things to get it up and running, not anything major. I'm going to start by bringing up the composition navigator, which is up here, upper left-hand corner. And let's just take out, so there's no graphics in. Let's bring in the lower. And you can see a bunch of things are sort of stacked on top of each other, right? And that's because we have not assigned those graphics to correspond with the aspect ratios that we want to work with. So I'm going to go to lower, I'm going to right arrow and go down to here, and then I'm going to hit the plus button, which is going to expand. You can see here's all the bits and pieces of the various graphics, of the various 3 graphics we're going to be, aspect ratios we're going to send out or render. So we've got landscape range, square range, and portrait range. And we'll talk about that word range in a minute. But 3 aspect ratios, 16, 9, 4, 3, and 9 by 6. So if we go to the first set, you can see they're all stacked on top of each other. So what we want to do is we want to assign them to, pin them, I'll say, to an adaptive range or an adaptive setting. So I'm going to hit the tab up here for adaptive at the group level. And I'm going to drop down, I'm going to say layout. I'm going to add it. And now it's going to prompt me which range of aspect ratios, or within what range. So if I scroll over landscape, you can see that anytime the aspect ratio of the output window, and we'll get that in a minute, is between those aspect ratios, you are going to see this group of graphics, this group of lower in this example. So I'll turn off all the other ones, so I only have landscape enabled. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to copy that, and I've copied this settings. I'll go to square, paste, and for the square one, turn on square, turn off landscape. And you can see right away it disappeared. And I'll come back to that in a minute. I'm going to do the same thing down here with portrait, paste, and turn on just portrait. And you can see it disappeared. And you say, well, why did it disappear? It disappeared because currently the aspect ratio of our canvas here that we're working on, our render window, if you will, is set to 1920 by 1080. If I hit this button here, which is going to switch the orientation, the little hand sort of drops it, it's going to swap it to a portrait range. And the second it does that, look at the composition tree, it turns on portrait and turns off landscape. Again, back to landscape, portrait. And now let's go to square simply by manually typing in 1080 by 1080, and the square turns on. So really pretty straightforward, I think, in terms of understanding, which graphics are doing what. Now, when this very first one was built, I think we start off most of the time I start off in a 1920 canvas. I'll get it the way I look, and then I'll just duplicate this entire group, rename it to whatever other aspect ratios I need to deal with, assign it, and then set the aspect ratio accordingly so you can move things around. Okay, so
really quick, Stephen, you guys probably didn't see much of a variation in these lowers. And that's because on these screen sizes, we sort of designed them to make them look sort of appropriate for the screen, but it's not very different. If you were to turn on the panel, we've got a panel graphic in here as well, amongst, I think, 4 other ones. If you take the panel graphic in, if you jump back up a level in the tree or turn on the comp navigator, that works.
So I'm going to go navigate
in the panel. Yeah,
navigator panel, and let's take out the lower so we don't confuse. So take out lower, comp navigator off. I'm going to open up the composition, the tree with the plus button, so we see everything. It's kind of nice to see the different pieces. Again, naming convention is consistent, right? 16 by 9, but we're in the panel, and I'll go ahead and paste for landscape. That one was already there. This paste feature is just so powerful because you can see the number of clicks I'm saving myself, right? I just go here, it's on the clipboard, paste, and now we're going to turn on portrait and turn off landscape. Immediately it turns off because we're in 16 by 9, right? 1920 by 1080 is within a 16. It's in the range of landscape, which is, as you can see here, if you roll over, that's the range. And that will become more obvious when we get to the responsive output. We'll get back to that. Again, if I turn it, like Catherine was saying, this one looks a little different. We kind of just centered the panel accordingly. But again, you can go change this around. Maybe you want this, I don't know, maybe you want it to be all the way at the top of the screen, for example, something like that. Again, I'll switch. This is what the graphic's going to look like in 16 by 9. This is what it looks like in portrait. And if I want to look at it, and just type in a square aspect ratio. Now I have this set to custom, just a little detail, so that I can manually just type in square, but you can grab other presets in here. I find this a little bit easier. Most of the time I'm authoring, I start out in 1920 by 1080, usually, I would say predominantly. Okay, so let's go ahead and knock off the other, assign the aspect ratios to the other graphics. Again, I already had the landscape copied, but I'll just copy it again. Let's move to the upper right social. I'll bring it in just so we can see it, take out the panel. And again, I don't have to open up the tree every time. I'll just go to adaptive and paste. That's for landscape, paste, turn off landscape, turn on square, portrait, paste, bang, boom, done, right? So now we've done this one. We'll move down to 2-line.
It's a little repetitive, but
we
all know that helps to get familiar.
Again, once you kind of get this workflow down, it's pretty straightforward. And I think the only one left is the baseline. So I'll bring in the baseline. You can see they are all stacked up on, well, sort of see that they're all stacked up. Landscape, square, and portrait. We're done.
And actually, I think Stephen, you had an interesting thought. This baseline isn't a ticker, but In one of our previous live streams, we talked about how would someone on a phone actually want to see a ticker? Is that enough room, at least on landscape, or I mean on portrait, to be able to see enough words go across the screen for it to be worthwhile? So you could, in theory, just not even have a graphic on, for example, for one of the outputs. If you're like, man, I don't want to send the ticker, then you can do that.
That's a very good point. Like, we just accounted for a version of the different graphics that are in our, you can see them listed in the comp navigator: lower, upper left, social, 2-line, upper right, panel, and baseline. You don't, like Catherine said, you don't have, if it doesn't work, you just don't have it. It just will not show up in that aspect ratio, which is kind of cool. So I think I'm going to set this back to 1920 by 1080 just by going bang here. And I like, good practice for me, I like to just take everything out when I'm done. And let's be good practice too. Let's go to revisions, and I'll just call this V1, just short for version 1. I like to always show that revision thing. Let's jump back to the dashboard. And we've got our composition. Now we need to make a control app. Pretty straightforward. I can go right click, new control app, or new control app. We're going to use Studio and hit create. It appends the word app there, as many of you users know. Pops open. We've got the app. Double click it. It's going to show up with the preview and program in the 16:9 aspect ratio, these two windows. Let's just bring in all the graphics with an auto playlist, upper right-hand corner. Just bring them all in quickly. Bang, there they are. And let's go with a panel first. Now, you can see the aspect ratio is set to 16:9. I'll bring it into program. And that's because, why is Studio in 16:9 and not one of the other two aspect ratios, 9:16 or square? That's because the root composition was at 19 by 20. I'm sorry, 19 by 20. I'm all over the place.
I mean, any aspect ratio you want to do.
16.874 by, no, it was 16:9. Thank you. So Studio reads the composition exactly the way you left it. And that's another reason why I took all the graphics out. Just blank slate, 16:9. When Studio, this instance of Studio was created, we're actually, as many of you know, we're taking a complete duplicate of the composition and bringing it into Studio, and then we add this beautiful user interface on top. So, for example, I just want to show this. Actually, before we do that, Catherine, should we move our way towards the output, to go right to output?
Maybe not. I just want to show what you kind of demonstrate what you're saying, in that if you leave the aspect ratio of your composition in another, like maybe flipped, and then you reload your control app,
refresh,
so it will display it. Yeah,
let's just finish that train of thought. There you go. You see, so now Studio is only going to show you one aspect ratio at a time, because to be quite honest with you, you really wouldn't want it showing you all three simultaneously. There's really no need for that. Once you have it authoring, I think generally speaking, and again, this is a generalization, probably 16:9 is the most common way to be viewing when you're producing 3 aspect ratios or more. You might be doing a ribbon board, right? Which is sort of a thin ribbon board, which you could certainly add that to the composition. I think generally speaking, most users I run into are going to be working in 16:9. It just gives you a nicer, I'll call it full canvas to see. Again, back to Studio, refresh or reread, refresh, go look at the changes we just made in the composition. Bang, we're in 16:9.
So it's not like these default sort of settings of your window and composer are going to affect the output. We're going to get into that in a second. We're going to pull out a responsive output. It's just what you're being able to preview as an operator. So exactly. Should we dive into the
panel? Let's bring in a panel, a baseline, and a lower. Something like that.
You can do all of them. 4 out of 5 of them. What's the upper left? Let's see that one.
Let's flex a little. Let's flex our muscles this morning with this cool feature. Okay, here we are. Studio. We have a bunch of graphics here. Let's go get our output URL. And by default, this is what the aspect ratio is. It's in a 16:9 ratio. But if you go to responsive, and by default, adaptive is set to.
Let's stay in responsive for a second, right? Or
oh, yeah,
do
yeah.
you want to?
Okay. No, yeah, we can do that. Just go here, copy this.
Yeah.
Open up another browser tab, paste. I'm going to just pull the tab away. There's all the graphics. Give it a second to load. Now, sometimes, see, in this case, actually, I might, something you and I didn't discuss earlier, Catherine, I might change the background color of the white later towards the end. Because in this example, it's kind of hard to see this graphic because it's white over white. The default is here, but we can come back to that. So now let's just start moving the window around. And as soon as I get within the range, right now, I mentioned we were going to talk about range. As soon as I get to the range within a, so we're in a range right now that is not in one of our three adaptives. Here we go. We're in the 16:9 range. Again, what do I mean by that range? Let's go back just for a second, back to the composition and look at landscape and roll over this. So whenever I get between 11:9 and 19:9 or 1.22 and 2.11 in terms of aspect ratio, as I'm dynamic back over to the output, as I'm dynamically moving around, it's going to automatically pop. So as soon as I get to the square,
I think it's not displaying.
Oh, you know what? Actually, I'm glad that, yeah, there clearly seems to be when we get to the square. So let's double check our composition.
No, I think when you're rescaling it, Zoom is not showing you resizing that output.
I don't think Zoom, I think it would be the browser, wouldn't it? Let me just double check to make
sure. No, we can't even see you're moving like the actual, I think it's like limitation of screen share. It doesn't actually show when you're there. I mean, it snaps to it. So
I see, but you don't
there's
see
another way we can show this, but
I see. You don't see the window dynamically changing. Okay, I got it. I just want to double check back over here in the panel that I got these right. Landscape, square, portrait. Yeah, it looks like I got these all right. And back to the output.
I think what we could do since it's not showing you scaling it. I mean, if you go let's go to portrait. It should snap to that for the viewers.
Oh, you mean force it to portrait on the output?
No, just keep scaling it. I mean,
oh, I see.
Maybe they're able to see and I'm not. There we go. So it does snap to the appropriate graphics.
It's just so let me go all the way to. What about now?
Yeah, it could just be me. We're seeing stuff.
You know what I think it is, to be honest with you? I'm not when I don't release the mouse, that's what's going on. So right now you're seeing
I see.
6:9 aspect ratio. So now I'm going to scale the window, release my mouse, and now you're going to see what these graphics would look like in a, I'll call it portrait range. Down.
Are we in portrait still, or are we in square? Because I think that panel. There we go. Now we're in portrait.
Yeah, I had to get down to a portrait. I had to push the window down a little bit. But here's portrait. Yep. So the graphics are responding, and I think the reason you're not seeing is I have to release the mouse. So now, boom, you're going to see landscape. Okay. So another way, if you look at the URL specifically, see how it says the word responsive. Let's go back to here where we generated the output, and back to Studio where we churned this from its normal default of 16:9. We turned it to responsive. There's nothing stopping you going to the adaptive panel. And instead of automatic, under layout, you can force it. So if I select square, for example, notice the URL changes. If I select just give me landscape, just the word landscape changes. So again, let's just grab another output, as many as you want. Let's go landscape, Command T, do a new window, landscape. If I duplicate the window and change this word to portrait, this is a little faster way than having to go all the way back to Studio. That's all you have to do, just change it to portrait. That's the portrait. Now, again, it's stretched out because I can get multiple outputs and line these up on the screen. It's kind of difficult for me to do that. Normally, I would do this on a second monitor. I could have all three Windows tabs pulled out as individual forced to portrait, forced to landscape. I just wanted to show you that because actually Catherine and I were talking about this morning under your output URL, but again, back to Studio. There's a bunch of different configurations you can do to modify the output and dictate what you want to see. Again, if I go back to automatic, in a responsive automatic scaling, when I scale the window, I'll see the snapping of the graphics. Things are going to be turning on and off based on how they're tagged in the composition. So I think that covers it. I did want to show that one more thing here, because this is actually in this example here, we're set to, let's go back here. Let's go back to our standard responsive output, which is 90% of the time you just use this one across all your devices because it is responsive. Just want to mention this one because it's kind of low-hanging fruit for us, Catherine, on the background. This is a great example where you're working and you go, yeah, I can't see, is that really the graphic? Because it's a white graphic on a white background. You can, while you're testing stuff, is simply change the background color from transparent to say green. Again, be mindful of the URL. We're just doing a background color equals RGB values here. So you can change that to hex if you want. Copy. We didn't discuss this, Catherine, before, but I think it's worth noting because this is a great example. Now you can really see that graphic. Again, you don't need to do RGB equals. You could do, you know, hashtag and then a back to white. It should be it. There's white. I think I got a typo in there. Again, maybe not something we discussed. Oops, sorry, I opened up the.
Actually, you pulled up the console, but that might be something worth showing, because within the developer console, you can also display different phone sizes or device sizes, really, on the right-hand side.
Yep,
keep it at we're in responsive. Yeah, it's on the top left of this panel that those little phone device icons go up a little more.
Oh, here it is. Sorry, I forget.
That guy. Yeah. So that's another really cool way to see what your responsive output looks like in these different sort of aspect ratios. That's snapping better than.
Yeah, it is. It's nice. It's snapping better within DevTools. And while we're here, why don't we show them one of our helpful website tools that you and I like, which is Responsinator. That's also in your tutorial. And let's open up Responsinator, and all you have to do is enter a site. What site? You guessed it. The responsive output that was on the clipboard. That's the responsive output of Singular. Hit the enter key and bang.
And we've still got that green in there because you defined that in the output, which is good. We can keep that in there.
Yeah, we can see it a little bit better. Actually, that's a great example of you know. And now let's go back over to, you know what? Let's go back over to Studio. Close this. I'm going to kind of move this. Hopefully you guys can see this. A little bit of scaling, a little bit of moving around. Let's just get rid of baseline, lower third, and panel. Bring Responsinator over here to the left, or I'm sorry, to the right. And again, some of this stuff, clearly, if you're going to be doing, like, you know, I would think a lot of people who would be authoring stuff might be on dual monitor setups. Like I would have Responsinator up. And now I can just scroll down Responsinator and I'll see, maybe if I just zoom down a little bit, it's a little tricky all on one monitor, but I'm seeing all the different aspect ratios simultaneously, all with free web tools. Responsinator is just a free little web tool. So it's really nice.
I think you can buy them a beer though, if you want to tip them. So.
Oh, I did see that. I love that one.
I think you did that actually at one point.
I think I might have. Because it's just so cool. You can see it. Yeah, as you scroll down, this is, you know, quite a bit going on here, but I can go ahead and bring in a bunch of different graphics. You're going to see them all in the multiple aspect ratio. Again, when you're in the web like this, I mean, there's so many great tools. Responsinator is just one of many tools. You know, you get to just have all these things at your disposal on the web that are just awesome and endless. You know, we're finding them all the time, but I've used Responsinator on a couple projects and pretty cool. I think I have to give a hat tip to Mr. Hat Tip, Mr. Thomas Molden, because I think he's the one who found this one. Anyways, I think, Catherine, keep me honest. Did I cover anything? Number one, and number two, do we have any questions from our viewers?
I don't know if I can see the extent of the chat right now. Actually, do you see anything? I don't think we have any questions. Hopefully it was pretty straightforward. And like we said, we've got that supplemental tutorial, so you can run through these things yourself. Let me
see here. Just double check here. Bear with me here. on Zoom. I've been in Google Meets for so long now that here we go. Here's our participants. Chats.
I think we can talk about, we might have one.
Oh, I just put a hi, everyone.
Oh, well, that is a comment.
If there's any questions, fire away. I have the chat window up now. Normally I don't do this portion, but I'm getting the hang of it. I hope everything made sense. It's again, this relationship, just to review really quick, I'm going to go back over to the composition. There's a bunch of things open here. Composition, we pin things to their appropriate adaptive, right? And we made a studio control app where any changes we make to the composition, we're going to be refreshing to get those apps. So that's business as usual, but you're getting multiple outputs at multiple responsive aspect ratios or locked aspect ratios. Again, we just did 3. There, you can do as many as you want. Yeah, endless. You just keep adding them, ribbon boards, whatever, locked pixel sizes. We're doing responsive aspect ratio. That's the sort of that was the theme of this video. So I don't see any questions.
Stephen, I know I'm not sure if any questions are going to come in, but we can talk about a use case that I found to be actually 2 that are pretty fascinating. There's one, a customer that you interface with, they specifically used, I believe they used this adaptive feature set to display a certain type of thing on the monitor behind them in their studio when a graphic came up. So they wanted like an image behind them related to a story that they were talking about, maybe with that a lower third. So there was a topic on that, and they wanted a specific image behind them. So you can do some really sort of sophisticated things in studio, in an actual physical environment on your monitors as well with this feature set.
That's a great example. And so in that example, it was a lower third super for one of our news outlets that uses Singular. And they simply, it's locked off camera, they start streaming, and behind them they have a monitor. So when they take that lower third, they want an accompanying image to come out of a second output, right? And land on that monitor behind them. They're talking about, I don't know, some story of the day. And so all you really have to do in that case, in that scenario, is just pin that graphic to another output, right? So if they have, I could show you that really quick. I'll just make another group and I'll put an image in it. And we need an image. So we should have an image in here somewhere, right? Let's put our logo. So there's our logo. So this logo right here, when I type in the words, when I type in Singular as my story, I want this to come out. So clearly what I would want to have is a new control field. I'm glad you showed this because this is a real world case scenario, which is, it's a little bit more than what we talked about in aspect ratio. This is just getting another output. So I'm just going to call this monitor. Okay. And then I'm going to connect it. No, it's this guy. And now I can just simply say, hey, this image, we'll call this image group, or let's call this monitor, monitor group, right? And it has an image, and I just go to adaptive and I can pin that to an output. So if I go to either layout or I go to, well, actually I'm expanding this a little bit, Catherine, just on the fly.
Yeah, we're getting into customs. That's okay. I think it's necessary.
I don't think it's that bad because all I'm doing now is I'm saying, okay, when the output URL has the modifier monitor on it, that unique URL, I'm going to send, maybe I use Chromecast to get to a TV monitor behind me. So when I come back over to Studio and I refresh and I look at the lower graphic, I'm never going to see this lower graphic on this output ever. But where am I going to get it? Again, there's no image selected. Let's go back and select our image.
You mean you're never going to see the image on
I'm never going to see the image. Thank you. Yeah. but I am going to see it. If I go to that, how do I get that, just that output of just that image when I take this lower third with an image selected? So I just go to output URL, and I'm going to set that to adaptives, and under,
custom.
It is under custom. You're right. And what did I call it? I called it monitor.
Yeah,
monitor.
with the capital M. Yeah. I think it's case sensitive. Maybe not. I don't know.
And you can see it gives me the monitor output. Hopefully this is.
And there's your monitor.
Oh, yeah, there it is. Now it's got the
got both.
The lower as well, because I've got why does it have the lower as well? Oh, because it's on as well. So what I would need to do here is set this to equal to, should work, right? Why does it have the lower third?
The stuff starts to get very sophisticated with equal to, part of. I think you have to add not part of in the landscape, like another adaptive setting in the 16:9.
Sorry,
that's good. We're troubleshooting right now.
Oh, I can't remember which one it is. Apologize. Equal to.
I think it, Stephen, there's a lot of different approaches. I think you could do equal to, but then in the landscape.
Oh. Custom add.
Custom one, right? Not part of.
Monitor.
Or not equal to, yeah. You just have to play around with these things a little bit.
It's still a little early in the morning for me. Ish. There we go. Now let's refresh this guy. Again, this was a really cool real world use case where it was, hey, I bring up this lower third, and if the story is, if I have you're not going to see the image preview here, but you will get it there. Right? So this output would go to the monitor behind you. And anytime you take this graph, you have this. Now, if you have nothing here and I hit update, the monitor behind me, if there was a monitor behind me, it's going to be blank. Again, it's all green here because I put everything over green. I modified the output to go over green. So hopefully that makes sense. I don't see any questions on that, which I hope is a good sign.
I wanted to add another sort of interesting concept that I've seen people use, and this is actually for a in-house worship. I think it was a synagogue. They did something quite fascinating, I think, with adaptive, very, very modern approach. They have their in-house worship, right, for the people that are inside of the synagogue with their monitors there displaying whether it's hymns or, you know, any part of the service on those monitors. But the live stream that they have at the exact same time, they're going to be throwing up different types of graphics that might not necessarily be full screen. They'll be paired with some video of the actual event of the service. So what they did is they had graphics dedicated to the stream, and then graphics dedicated to whatever was inside of the environment. So you can start to get really sort of creative with adaptive and those kind of use cases where you can control a physical environment at the exact same time that you're controlling the stream graphics. So it's really quite cool to see when people start to push the boundaries of this feature set.
There we go. I think we covered everything. I think you mentioned this probably be a shorter webinar for this morning. And like I said, I think it really shows off just how powerful it is when you're all in the web. And again, that Responsinator tool, we didn't write Responsinator. It's a great little web tool. It's just bang, throw in the URL and you can see what you're authoring in multiple aspect ratios simultaneously. So hat tip to the R&D guys that put this together, because I find it really, really powerful and deep. Like Catherine said, you can do combinations of those adaptives. And again, this can get into multiple languages, different outputs for different languages, and on and on and on. So it's very powerful, But at its most rudimentary, and I think that's the nice thing about the template example, it's just 3 aspect ratios. It's 9:69, 9:16, and square. So it shouldn't be too daunting if you just kind of want to dabble and play around with it, using that template and using the link to the text that Catherine prepared in terms of following through what we did today. And then obviously you have this video. So I thought we don't have any questions today. I think we're wrapped up, I think.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Thanks everyone for watching, and I'm looking forward to our next time we do this. I think we're going to be joined by someone pretty cool, so I'm looking forward to that one. That's what, a couple weeks, 2 weeks, something like that.
Oh, you mean our live stream?
Yes, the live stream.
Live with Singular.
Yes.
Yeah, that should be fun.
Yeah.
And I'm sure we'll do plenty more of these webinars on adaptive, because as you guys have seen, it gets pretty robust and you can get very creative. Like Stephen said, different languages, you can do different sponsors, which is really smart if you want to sell sponsorship slots to different audiences. It's just really cool. So
yeah, it's good. Well, that's it for today. Thank you everyone for watching. Again, download that template, play around with it, give us some feedback. We're curious. Hopefully you guys have no troubles or hiccups in trying the adaptive features of Singular. And we will be back with our next time you see us. We'll be on our Live with Singular.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.